excuse. Was there any corrections to the minutes as you saw them?
Nope.
Didn't see any either, so we'll check through that. Is there anybody here in the public that would like to comment? One reporter, one past reporter? Okay. Is there any correspondence?
So you have two items of correspondence, they're included in your packets. One is the correspondence from Dave Reese that was presented to you at the common council meeting.
Correct.
But he submitted it, so I wanted to be sure it was in your packet.
Correct.
And then you have a multi-page letter from Carolyn Marks. I'm scrolling to that now, on the topic of neighborhood markets.
Correct. So we will not talk about the neighborhood markets today, and I just want the general public to know that we have approximately 6 more months before that, apologize, somebody help me out with the wording. We have a
Moratorium.
pause, the moratorium, thank you, is up. So, and there's nothing that says that if we're not ready, we can do another one. So the first topic, we'll pick up where we left off a couple of weeks ago, and that's on the ethics board. So the document that I sent to you guys a little bit earlier this afternoon is something that I put together last week and is definitely a rough draft of where I was going. I was trying to explain myself a couple of weeks ago, the amount of language that was missing. I know the three of us, we tried finding a shortcut, but here's the cut and paste format of taking the language that needs to be there and putting it into our local laws. So everything in yellow is been brought out of the New York State General Municipal Law, Article 18. And I wanted to, Don, if you have the document in front of you, Shane and I, we just numbered our pages. But if you go to the page that has Article 2, Board of Ethics, I kind of want to just point this out. So the new Section 21-11 established is the heading. It recognizes, Shane and I had worked on going from 3 to 5 members for the Ethics Board. And I highlighted also appointed official because that's something that was added. But if you skip the sentence of the same sentence, you'll see where it says appointed officer. So that was in the original local law that the city of Oneonta had. And all I did was when you see that anywhere else, I'm just acknowledging that the state general municipal law says appointed officials, but for some reason we had appointed officers. So for me, I would probably strike officer and make it official, so then we have commonality with the state.
Yes. I concur.
Okay. And then we finish up on page 11 with the sections that were already in our code. And I renumbered them, and that's obvious by highlighting the new back number. Section I want to put out. So, also I was looking at Otsego County's Board of Ethics documents, and they have forms for the actual enactment of the ethics board. And I think we should take a look at what they offer. I'll send you a copy of what they have. I don't see anything on there to change. Obviously, the logo in the same county of Otsego would need to be changed. Those are obvious, but the rest of the format I thought made sense, and at least put in a rough draft, and I can do that and move this forward, and then we'll put it together and send it to David. And unless you're familiar with just so David, if you didn't hear me before walking in, everything in yellow is new to our local law, and the majority of it comes from General Municipal Law, Article 18. We were just missing a lot of terminology and sections. Oh, the term, sorry, that's what it was the term. Shannon, did you have a thought on how long of a term, or Greg, do you think we should just follow in suit with other boards, commissions of our charter?
Well, I think the purpose is to ensure that the mayor who appointed them, right, is not who they're gonna have to review at some point.
Right. I think in the state, or it was Otsego County, they had it down for 1 year, and I don't believe in a 1-year term, because it's just, you're not gonna get any consistency.
Right. And then we would run the risk of having what we don't want.
Right.
Len, the one thing I was gonna, in looking at this, did you look at our ethics policy? Because we have an ethics policy that has to be, that's already been adopted. And the ethics policy includes the Article 18, a lot of the Article 18 procedures. You know, the references to the statutory requirements already in it. And so I don't know whether, and we can certainly put it in the statute, because it's all the same.
Right.
But whether or not the issues that you raise in the statute is already covered by our policy, and that's the application of our policy, rather than having this set up. The board reviews whether or not the policy has been complied with, instead of setting the policy as part of the establishment of the board.
I've not seen the policy. I didn't even know that we had
Well,
that.
let's make sure. Do we have an ethics policy?
Yes.
That's all. Maybe we can get that to Lynn.
And China.
Because we've never populated this, right? In your 30-plus years, we've never populated the ethics board?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, we have.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, sure. Whenever we've had an ethics issue, whenever there was an allegation that there was a violation, and an ethics board was necessary, and either someone requested it or someone on the council requested it, or there was an issue, then it was populated.
Okay.
So it was not a standing committee because it's been used so rarely, that having people said, oh yeah, we're gonna do that, when there hasn't been a call for it. Classically, what's happened is if there was a council member or somebody who had concern about a conflict of interest or something like that,
Right.
they would classically come to me for an opinion, and I'd write them an opinion as it relates to Article 18. So in some ways, I was an interpreter of the code of ethics, but I haven't, again, whether that was very often the only time that I recall when we had a hearing, and again, it's lost in this time to me,
Right.
was when there was a dispute between a council member and the council itself as to something that they wanted to do.
How long ago do you think the last time it was popular?
Probably, I think maybe 20 years ago.
Okay.
Copy of the policies on your email.
Okay.
Thank you. Wait. This is what we started with.
Yeah, so I included those sections. Do you have, you sent it to David also, right?
Yeah.
So like sections 21-3, standard of conduct. Yeah, this is the local law. This
Yeah,
is
they
like
sign
cut
the
and
code of
paste.
ethics, they sign it at the bottom affirming that they're going to.
Okay. Yeah, so section 21-2, the definitions, literally we only had 2, and the state had more conservative,
Yeah.
more than that. And then the standards of conduct. compared to what the state offered were quite a bit different also.
Yeah, again, I don't want, I just wanna make sure that they weren't in conflict or there was an issue with it.
Yeah, so I actually included that 21.3 would go to the new 21.7 standard of conduct, so I copied and pasted that from our
The,
local law.
the only other thing, a purely technical one, and I don't know, and this is a policy determination, not a legal one. Currently, the value of the benefit received for nominal gifts on the state level is $75, and it's $25 in the city. And I don't know whether we wanna, what I generally like to do is make things consistent, and maybe we can make it, instead of, if it's under 21-3A, under gifts.
Changing
I
it
don't
to
know if that really
75.
Well, no, to change it to be that it shall be whatever the state standard
Correct.
is, and then we don't have
Then we don't have this.
we don't have a specific dollar amount in there, just make it consistent with whatever the New York State, requirement is for public officials. Cause we have had situations where somebody would, like give a $50 ticket to something at the Hall of Fame, and then they can't do it because we have a $25 limit, even though the $75 limit is there, and it just has, in the past, has created consternation among public officials if we just make it consistent with the state, whatever it is, and if they leave it at 75, great, but if they raise it, then they can, or lower it, we can just be consistent with it instead of having to constantly check the two things.
So I just put a little something in there for wordsmithing, but when we
Yeah.
send this to you,
It's something I'm sensitive to, so I'll pick up on it.
okay,
I have these small burrs under my saddle that bother me over the years, and I pull them out whenever I have to deal with them.
okay. Alright, so you'll wordsmith,
Yeah, send me your outline and I'll wordsmith it.
okay. So then, again, how we establish it, and Carrie, I know that you're briefing it also, but since I put the city clerk in here multiple times, I just need you to make sure I didn't overstep. Under general procedures, Carrie, last sentence, I have the city's website, but I don't think I put it in the right address, just double checking on that.
Yeah, bonianta.ny.us.
Yeah. Where is it? Oh, David, about employees being on this, I wouldn't have thought that we'd want an employee on there. Do we want an employer on the ethics board?
The thought was to have, it depends on whose ethics are being questioned.
Sure.
If we have an employee that's doing it, they wanted to make sure that they had an employee representative available. They were just trying to look for a broad spectrum of perspectives. But again, if that's a philosophic determination. I mean, part of it is that they want somebody who has knowledge of the issues that arise in public service. So if you just pick somebody out of the community that has no clue,
Okay, alright.
then that puts a burden on them. Then you have to educate them, and they don't know what's going on. And I don't mean that in a negative sense.
No, I see your perspective though.
So,
I was just thinking of the employee having to rule against another employee.
Well, that's exactly why they wanna have an employee on there, because they want somebody, if there's an employee involved, who identifies, you know, it's a peer, it's a jury of their peers, instead of just having somebody, you know, some PhD guy from SUNY, saying what's ethical or not.
So then let's drive down a little bit further. Do we wanna have it as an employee that's part of that same department?
Again, I think,
Because
I think-
would somebody from DPS know what a firefighter does, or
in
what
my
a police officer?
mind, that may be getting a little too granular, which again,
Who would make those decisions
Well,
though,
that's-
at the heat of the moment?
yeah, if you loop back around, to the very beginning, that's why if you only, we've used the term populate, and I like that, is if you populate the committee on an as-needed basis, then you can begin to look, if you're looking, again, to get a jury of the peers, or from various perspectives, then you can tailor the board to the situation. Instead of saying, you know, there's always gotta be somebody, and what if they're in the same, you know, if there's a conflict because they're both on the same crew, things like that.
Right.
Anyway, I'm just saying, these are, the interior machinations are things that affect each other. Which is why when you're looking at this, you can change it.
I was just looking
We
at,
understand
this
the way it's
is
said,
not boilerplate, we actually wanna create a template of what should
Understood.
happen, because we don't know who's gonna populate the mayor's seat.
Yeah,
And will they understand that very notion that we want an employee from the same department, or we want an employee that's from a different department?
again, you can make it say whatever you want. You can say it's part of your policy if you wanna say that the purpose, that in forming the board, you wanna always have you wanna have people coming from different perspectives in order to get a broad spectrum of opinion.
Right.
And if there's and again, you can get as granular as you want. You just have to decide how granular you wanna get.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of an ethics issue that you would wanna have a coworker
Yeah.
participate in. I'm just trying to run different scenarios.
Well, there
inside
might be
my
a
head.
conflict of interest having somebody who's on your own crew, for example, being, or on your shift, also sitting on an ethics determination.
Yeah,
So that may be something you specifically don't want. You see,
Right.
it's a conundrum.
so that's why I was looking at it going, well, maybe we don't want employees to participate, but you did raise a good point that you might get people within this board that have no understanding whatsoever of
Yeah.
what that conflict of interest, because basically that's what this is gonna come down to.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, and
This is why you get paid the big bucks.
Is that a conflict of interest?
getting paid the big bucks,
You know, they vote on their own salary. Sorry,
For the future term.
this is not an open meeting. Well, no, Laura, I'm just kidding.
Um,
No, come on, Laura, what's the question?
I'm not down for populating the board as needed. I think we should have a board set.
yeah, I agree with that. I think the county did that, they populated it so that folks would have an opportunity to really kind of bone up on what they're gonna be responsible for. If they don't get used, they don't get used, but at least you would be able to, I'm assuming as our city council, you would run them through a class of what their expectations would be.
You know, if you ever ask me a question, it takes half an hour for me to respond, so the answer to that is yes. Come on, Laura, jump in.
I did have a question. Is there anything in the municipal employee union contracts that says that they have to have a union representative at ethics board hearings? I know that they do that at disciplinary hearings, but is there anything in here that says, or any other contracts, that says they have to have a member at these ethics hearings?
I would say, I don't know, because I've been gone eight and a half, almost not, coming up on 9 years now, so I've been in one of the contracts almost a decade, so. But prior to that, I don't.
And again, you gotta remember
ethics.
what these do is opinions.
Yeah.
This can be an opinion, so it's not a wages, hours, and working conditions thing, which is the classic rule employees are at the working conditions.
Yeah, if an ethics ruling could lead to disciplinary hearing,
In that case, if there was a disciplinary hearing, they'd have to have representation.
not necessarily at the ethics board hearing.
Usually with an ethics board hearing, it's requested by a person. Someone wants to have an interpretation because they don't wanna jump unless they have something to land on. So in my experience, it's not because someone is challenging somebody else's, or if somebody's challenging their ethics, then the person who's at risk
There it is.
requests a determination by a preliminary determination before they make a final commitment, so it's usually requested, yeah.
If we go to page 8, under general procedures, it talks about a 1-year term.
Yeah,
So,
This is on your outline.
if
Yeah, I'm with you.
Section 2112 under the new.
Yep.
General procedures, so I'm gonna, I forgot to strike 3 members in the second sentence there, it'll be 5.
right.
And then a 1-year term, are we thinking a 3-year term?
I would,
Is that consistent, Craig, with the charter? You know, does anybody know off the top of your head, right, it's 3 years?
3 years.
Okay.
I think they're all right.
So if we strike that and make it a 3-year.
Can
Okay.
I ask a question? then
Sure,
if
go
you're
for it.
overstepping? When you, sorry, when you do the initial population of the board, can you do staggered appointments so that not everybody goes at once?
I concur.
Please, and thank you.
And Carrie, in your professional opinion, how staggered is successful?
Even if you do like 2 at 3, 2 at 2, 1 at 1, is that, just something so that there's some turnover.
Yeah,
And that'll also get you across multiple people in the chair.
Right. That's a good idea, thank you. Okay.
so I do have a question about, so we were on page 8, so the city board ethics and power, that paragraph, the first highlighted paragraph, it's down by 2. So prior to filing a complaint, people are encouraged but not required to attempt to resolve the situation through other means. So are we suggesting that they try to handle the ethics thing on their own, like with the person they feel they've been unethical with?
I think what it's asking is if you have an opportunity to resolve the issue by having a conversation with that other individual or individuals prior to making a formal complaint. Am I misinterpreting it?
Okay, cause I guess the only thing for me is like, if I feel like I have been violated, the last thing I want you to do is come talk to me and try to come figure it out.
That's a good point. Don, what do you think about that?
Oh, I thought I wasn't part of the meeting.
You're a council member.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
Do we, like, so for instance, like if you were wanting to be, like, include something of this, like, Catholic Charities, there's different groups that do like legitimate mediation, where they have trained mediators, there's people at Job Corps who are trained mediators. We could just say like a referral to mediation is available if need necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe not say, hey, did you try to take out
certified mediation?
Yeah, that certified mediation is available, or certified mediation resources all are available upon request.
And Shannon, you found that within the general procedures? Where is that?
Um,
I'm not
so
seeing it in
on
general.
page 8,
Yeah.
power and duties,
Right.
the first highlighted.
Oh, the first, oh, sorry, I was trying to find it through general.
If you go to 2,
Over to-
persons may file a complaint. That
Gotcha.
sentence, and then
Yeah.
it says prior to filing a complaint, people are encouraged but not required.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, I'll make that change. So then this, obviously the city would be held financially responsible then to provide the certified mediation source then, right?
The what?
Then the city of Oneonta would be held financially responsible for paying for that.
Catholic Charities does it for free.
Oh, okay,
And, yeah,
okay.
service they offer, I'm not sure if there might be another program that offers it too, but definitely Catholic Charities.
Okay. Was there anything else that stood out? What I'll do is I'll redo this and then I'll send it to David to go over, clean it all up, make it pretty. Okay.
So the having an employee, did we,
We didn't settle on it, you're right. I think for now, we probably should leave the employee in there, and then maybe what we can do is hone in on who actually populates the ethics board as one part of the procedure.
well, cause the mayor has people to appoint currently.
With the council's approval.
Right.
So would that be enough opportunity for the council members to object to that particular employee?
So this, the selection of the employee, like, for instance, Mark has appointed a lot of people to a lot of spaces with a lot of titles. And I
Right,
feel like it would be really tough to find people to populate that weren't in support of Mark.
right,
So,
right.
right, like, so how, like, do we suss out people, so not necessarily, I guess I don't wanna throw Mark necessarily under the chopping block, but like the capabilities of what a mayor can do, you know, and so when we do suggest to have an employee,
Okay.
like, how do we discern whether or not, like, don't put me on Carrie's ethics, like, that's gonna be terrible, right, but if people don't
Right.
watch meetings, they're not gonna know not to throw me on as a council, you know what I mean, like, so it's like, how do we discern which employees would be,
Right, that's what I was getting with David there. Is it just that, say the employee got paid for whatever services, use one of the departments, whatever service they were providing, somebody compensated them more than, say, the $75.
Okay,
So let's just stick to monetary, a gift.
right.
So do you want a fellow worker to be on that ethics committee, or do you want an employee from a different department to sit on there?
I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if it's somebody who's from that department, it might be in favor of, or also the person may be embarrassed to have a coworker on their ethic. You know what I mean? It could go
Sure.
either way. Could we, like, trying to think.
You're using Carrie as an example. Carrie has a department of 2.5.
2.5.
I'm one of 3 departments that have 2 actually.
Oh, that really gets close if we say pick an employee from that department. Because if somebody slid Carrie a $100 bill to get some paperwork done, backdate some paperwork, and she gets caught, if we write that in there that we gotta pick a fellow employee out of that department, I'm concerned that it's gonna get really close.
Right. It's too bad, like, we couldn't find people, like, who were, like, similar in other spaces that are similarly positioned. Like,
So, an employee that's maybe in the county,
that's what I was thinking initially, but that might get complicated. I mean, if it's only happening every 20 years,
good point.
but like, if, you know, if for instance, somebody who works for like Parks and Rec, right here, maybe we pull someone who works Parks and Rec, or ask somebody who works Parks and Rec elsewhere, but like, do they have to come? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
so
what's
then-
their duty?
Then technically it wouldn't be an employee of the municipality, because that's
Right.
what that's representing, as an employee of the municipality.
Right.
That's why I was
Because the whole goal is to not have our friends on the ethics board.
correct. And even nepotism isn't mentioned in any of this yet,
Right.
so. The county ethics board, in their document, they have quite a section just on nepotism. So, and I can add that if you think we should, but.
I think we should. Not to give you more work to do. I mean, are we even allowed to do that? Could we say, hey, county parks and rec guy, can you please come?
You can establish any criterion, you know, within reason that you choose. I mean, you can't bring somebody in from Alaska. You probably could, but I'm serious. I mean, the board can determine, and again, if the council agrees with you as to how the board is calculated, as long as it isn't inherently flawed. I mean, you can't say that it has to be the brother of the person who committed the violation, as long as that.
Right.
That would be in conflict with the statute, but can you do it? Yeah, it's just the question is, you have to, the more generic the board, the more likely it is to fit the situation. The more granular you get about who has to be on the board, the more likely you then have to begin thinking about what the possible issues are going to be, which would raise a conflict within trying to populate the board.
Mhm.
Right.
You know,
So why don't we just make it up with like an employee that's in a similar sector that's not employed by the city of Leona, but maybe populated from the county or the town or from.
so, but if you do that, then you aren't determining on the board until there's already a complaint in front of you. And you can't name them.
And then
Because if
we
you
have-
name them, then they would already be there, and so, again, the reason, you gotta pick your poison. Either you're gonna do it and have it populated and say that at least one member has to be from a city employee, or you wait until you have a complaint and then decide how you're gonna.
Well, do
Flush
we
it.
have to pick poison? I mean, like, couldn't we just say we can have this member come in at the time? Like, why does it have to be
What,
pre-there?
what member would come in at what time?
No, meaning like if we have a populated board
Yeah,
and like say Carrie goes crazy and I need to get a clerk from somewhere else,
yeah.
like couldn't we have someone come in that time as the person who is the employee to come in and be impartial? Like why can't we do both?
So you're saying that you populate it and then if there's a conflict with the person who's been appointed?
No, meaning I have a board of a certain amount of people.
Okay,
Right.
and one of them, the city employee.
And one of them is going to be selected depending on the issue. So if Carrie pops up, it's clerks. And
So
I'm
you have
pulling a
4
clerk
people
from-
appointed and one that's gonna be appointed if there's a city employee involved.
Yes.
And again, you can create it any way you want, but again, the theory of doing this was so you'd have a standing board available.
Correct.
I
Well,
mean, if you're gonna do it anytime you want, then you can go back to where we were and create it when you need it.
When needed.
And simply describe who's gonna be involved when you need it.
but if we have 5,
Mm,
right,
right.
5 what, people?
members,
Yeah,
we could have, I mean, couldn't we have somebody who is able to relent if we have to have somebody who's a city employee under ethics review? And one of those members could step aside and allow for somebody who's
who would step aside?
impartial.
How would you determine that they weren't impartial?
we
See,
would just
what's
let
happening
them
is that
decide. I'm
you're-
trying to have impartially, I'm trying to make sure that they're getting support from people who understand their job and what goes into it, but at the same time, Carrie, like, are you best friends with the clerk in Otsego County? Okay, so, do you see what I'm saying?
But
Like,
10 years from now, it might be. Again, the question is not, I don't think Carrie's ever gonna be in front of an ethics committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here for you, kid.
There's something someone was saying.
It's a tough one, isn't it? It's hard to, if we wanna populate the board, and I agree, we should populate them now, allow them to have their 5 years.
I mean, you can always
They-
populate it, and then if it turns out that there's a conflict of interest, because they work next to them every day,
Yeah.
then that person would recuse himself, and you could appoint somebody to do that. So I think you're better off, if the goal is to populate using whatever criteria you want to get a broad spectrum, and then worry about inherent conflicts if it does. And if I'm here, I'll believe you, I'll tell you there's inherent conflict. And if the person who's on the committee or who's looking at it from the outside, if there's a conflict, you'll know it,
Right,
if you'll see it.
I agree.
If I'm somebody who wants to, like, make sure that I'm doing something, if I'm being deceitful, are you gonna know it?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
What I'm saying is that
Are you being deceitful
Hold
or
on.
not?
No, but okay, take here. Say John has done something unethical, and I really want to make sure that nothing happens to Don. And so I get appointed. I'm not going to be like, hey, hypothetically not Shannon, but someone could be like, hey, Don and I barely know each other. I just met him the other day.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because you want somebody objective making a determination as to ethics, not my best buds.
Remember, you're only gonna be 1 out of 5 votes.
Do you understand?
I understand what you're getting at, but
Okay.
just remember though, you're only gonna be 1 out of the 5 to vote, and that's why I think it's even better to have 5 instead of just 3.
The 3, yeah.
The only other challenge, and I want to talk about that, is if we go to another municipality, asking them for a employee similar profession, is that we're gonna have to go through this entire process with that municipality to explain the necessary need to have that employee to populate this.
So how does Otsego County navigate that piece?
They actually have an employee in there, but, no, yeah,
Maybe we could offer them
I
our.
think they had their PR.
Oh yeah, I told you, we got a budget PR, say just.
Yeah. Alright, so I'll add the nepotism from Otsego County, I'll clean up the rest of this. Was there anything else that you're seeing? you sent that to us on the, got it, 24th.
Carrie, what did I do? What happened to my fancy little book?
Did you want me here for this, by the way? I'm more than happy to stay, like, that's a lie, but
No,
if you wanna
if
get
you
rid
don't
of
wanna
me.
be in the film, this is the last thing we're gonna do today, is
Okay.
film permits, thank you, David.
Okay.
Sorry, I
No.
should have thought of that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's put it. I want what? I want a drink. Scotch for that.
So we're.
Here, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Do you have yours? The
Film
film
permit, yeah.
Okay, I found, sorry, I found it online. I don't think there was anything that we needed to add here, right? It was just regarding the acknowledgement of cost on this permit, right? To,
So you need to codify it. You're codifying it, so you're generating the legislation to allow this to happen. And in that legislation, you'll set the fees.
well, fees would always be dynamic, right? We would say that it would go to
As
the
set from
fees.
time to time by the, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we just need a motion out of the legislative committee that codifies this form.
So you need legislation, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, that enables the enactment of this policy and allows the city to participate in the permitting of activities during the filming process.
So that really would go, not just on this permit application that's part of our packet, that would actually go back to, Greg's, not this Greg, clients. Correct?
I think ultimately you need to, pass an ordinance that would establish a new section of the city code that would describe why and what is required, that you're requiring a film permit for whatever purpose. Typically you might establish that code section first and then establish an application. Kind
Yeah, we
of
kind
went the other way around
Yeah,
based
we're
on the
gonna-
fact that we were looking at
exactly.
applications. from elsewhere. But
So we're gonna have to write a new code for this application. New,
right, the city can't charge a permit fee or require a permit for something unless, you know, it's spelled out in the city code that we do that and what that process may be.
I mean, I'm assuming the code would have to be fairly flexible, given that a lot of these things are changing, like they can change, like the things being used, you know, the types of effects, stuff like that.
Go ahead.
Excuse me?
Go ahead.
Oh, I saw that permit and I showed it to Dylan, I don't remember his last name, at Phil Masigo.
Okay.
And he said it would be beneficial for people who want to make movies because it's standard and it adds credibility to their project.
Right, I mean, that is ultimately the goal here is to have film companies coming to Oneonta to produce and film movies and short, maybe documentaries. Ultimately, that's the goal. So, so like Greg and Carrie were saying, we kind of went about it differently, not backwards, but just differently.
The town of Greenville, New York has an ordinance, I'm sending a copy to your email now, kind of like a kickoff. Kind of reference, because why reinvent it? And some of it clearly won't apply, but it's very short, sweet, to the point.
Wait, did you send it to me? Oh, you did.
Alright, I'll use that as a, thank you, I'll use that as a reference and I'll create a. Cause there's just something, I was gonna say, use this as a reference and send it over to David, but I mean, immediately it's talking about septic systems and the
Yeah.
size of the Corvette and then 13th.
But, yep.
Okay. Shannon, you're gonna be okay on the 13th?
Yes.
Okay. If need be, because we've gotta get through the ethics and the film, we really need to start working on the communications also for our agenda. If you would take a look at the fee schedule also, again, that was me just looking at it going, do we really need to penalize somebody that wants to put an arcade in? I thought the whole premise was for us to create an opportunity. I think Katie had something about the fee schedule she wanted to talk about also, so if you look at it, just see if there's something that pops out at you, that'd be good.
Yeah, no, remember I said to you about the billiards tables, I was
Yeah.
like, I was surprised that we charged for a billiards table.
Right. Because it's not putting any extra work on the clerk's office, so. And then.
You have to pay to have fun in this town.
If we can get through that, then we'll somewhat get caught up, and again, we still have several months, but I don't wanna wait to the very end to talk about the neighborhood, I think June, we should be talking, if we can get through this, we can be talking about, the neighborhood markets in June. Okay?
I mean, if you need support in any of writing any of this or researching and stuff like.
Absolutely. So if you find another town for the film permit that has legislation in it, just let me know,
Okay.
okay?
So for May 13th legislative committee agenda, I've got ethics board coming back,
Film permits.
film permits, fee schedule,
And the fee
communications, and redistricting based on emails I saw.
You're right. We're supposed to have redistricting, good point.
And I'll put them in that order, or might as well do the agenda while we're here.
I mean,
So say it again, Greg, you had ethics,
Got ethics, and then film,
right?
then not zoning code, neighborhood markets, pushing that off. Fee schedule,
Mhm.
communications, and redistricting.
Yes.
Look at that, Carrie, we can send the agenda out tonight.